This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, August 13th, 2021, and my guest is the excellent Jason Cipriani of ZDNet. Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a busy week. I'm kind of tired, but I'm also super excited to have you on because last time I had you on, we were in Europe at Huawei's, whatever it was, tour in Munich in a hotel room of all things.
Yeah, I think we were sitting in a hotel room with a couple of executives from Huawei in Germany, recording the first episode I was on with you, which was a ton of fun. So it's good to be back.
Yeah, thanks for being back. And I know you podcast on a regular basis. I'm like, how have I not had Jason back since then? Anyway, so look, it's Samsung Unpacked Galaxy Insanity Week, as we all know. I have kind of tuned out a little bit on this, to be frank. I was like, well, it's too early in the morning, 7 a.m. Pacific. It's a public event. I've been briefed already. I know everything that's happening. So I was like, let's just kind of see what people make of it. Now, you wrote a real great recap, actually. So walk us through basically what happened, and let's dig into each of the items, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was yet another virtual event, which we've gotten used to now over the last, 18 months or so, 16 months. So Samsung, basically, if you were briefed, you pretty much know exactly what the event was, because instead of just being a pre-recorded briefing, it was a pre-recorded virtual event that was more or less a commercial, right? They announced four major products, or four main products, I guess I should say. And one of those being the new Galaxy Watch 4 and the Watch 4 Classic, which is the first pair of smartwatches that we are getting to see that
with Wear OS, the new Wear OS.
With Wear OS, right? Exactly.
Hold on a second. I'm confused about one thing. What's the difference between this active and non-active?
So the active is gone. They're no longer using that name at all.
Classic,
so it's,
whatever.
Yeah, it's Watch 4 and Watch 4 Classic. And Classic, which I'm actually wearing right now, so people who are going to get the video will be able to see. The only difference is the design. The feature set and the specs are identical. The Classic has the traditional Samsung rotatable ring around it, the Classic has that. The standard Watch 4 basically is the active, which it has the flat design, they're not the recessed screen. So they've changed the names there, but they're effectively the same as they were before. Right? Like there's not a huge difference, especially feature-wise. They do exactly the same thing. The Watch 4 is $250. The Watch 4 Classic is $350. So a little bit of a price difference.
But I mean, actually, it's quite a bit. Now you're saying, mention it. Strange if the feature set's the same. Does it still have? I have an old original watch, not the Watch 2, the Watch 1 with Tizen, and I love it. And I don't use it much anymore because I have had more wearables to review since. But I love the ring around the screen. Yep. Is that still there, or is that a capacitive thing like the active was?
So the regular Watch 4, it's capacitive. The Watch 4 Classic has that ring for you to navigate and go through. So it's there, but the screen is recessed. It's not level with the bezel. So it makes it kind of hard to do gestures on the edges of the display, which I wish it would have been level with it like it is on the Watch 4. I don't have a Watch 4. I just have the Classic, Watch 4 Classic here with me now. But, hey, it's still, so far, has been a great watch. Wear OS powered by Samsung, I think, is the official name that they announced during the event.
So it's essentially One UI 3.0 on a watch.
Effectively, with Google integration. If Google Maps is on it now. I know Messages and a few other apps are supposed to be there, but we have 2 weeks or so before this launches, and I have yet to see Messages work. Obviously, you could reply to messages, text messages you get or whatever, but the app isn't built into the watch.
Now that you mentioned disparities between those two, price-wise, at first I thought that's not a big deal, but I thought there was going to be more functionality. So, okay. So it sounds to me like the capacitive thing was well done on the one time I used the watch active. So it seems to me that you probably want to just buy the base model, right?
I mean, yeah, I haven't used the base model yet, so I can't speak to how battery life or whatever. They have the same size battery, so there really shouldn't be any difference at all. If I was putting my money towards a Galaxy Watch 4, I would buy the Watch 4 standard, not the classic. And it's for that reason. I like that design better. I like the flat display that doesn't have the rotating bezel. I know Samsung has been panned quite a bit for not having that on all of its watches. But when they added the digital version, the capacitive version in it, it worked just fine. And I prefer that model. One feature that they brought to these watches that they made a huge deal about is a new combination of 3 sensors. And they're calling it the bioelectrical impedance analysis combination.
Fancy name.
Yes, very fancy. And so what it does is it's the heartbeat sensor, which has AFib detection. You could do your ECGs. It has a blood oxygen level sensor, which are standard, right? Those are, if you make a smartwatch now, those are standard
those
components.
Have to be there.
Yep. But now they actually measure your body composition.
How the hell do they do that?
Yeah. So the actual keynote went through a whole process of demonstrating it. But basically, there's electromagnetic current that goes through your body, and there's 2 buttons on each watch. And what you need to do is put your fingers on each button while you're doing this, and the watch walks you through.
Right, so it goes from one arm to the other arm. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it goes through your whole body,
sense.
and then at the end, it tells you how much of your body is water, how much is fat, your density, all that stuff.
Crazy.
It is, but like my scale's been doing this for years, right?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
It's so far, I have yet to get the appeal of why I want my watch to do that.
I just don't find the appeal of any device wanting to tell me that unless I'm an athlete. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Or unless like my doctor says, listen, you need to monitor this. It's a problem or something. Then I'm on board with things like step tracking, working out and tracking my exercise on a map, seeing how many calories I get and all that. But like, there are some things that I feel are just a little too much. But hey, anyway, so let's jump to the phones because honestly, to me, that's a doozy. I think I'm going to preface this, but this is based on just the briefing. I haven't touched the phones. I know there was a hands-on briefing in New York. Didn't make it to that. But my gut feeling is that they are finally at a place where these devices can be recommended to almost anyone. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, I say you are 75% correct. I'm not sure the Fold 3 can be recommended to anyone because it's still expensive. And we'll dive into what all they've added to it to justify that price. They've dropped the launch price. It's $1,800 for the Galaxy Z Fold3. They also announced the Galaxy Z Flip3, which is $999.
And that I'm super excited about. Honestly, I love the Flip last year. And the price point here, it's like you buy that or you buy a flagship. And I think, you don't have a telephoto on this, but there's a lot of flagships that don't have telephotos anymore now, like the OnePlus 9. So, okay. So this becomes a valid proposition in my book.
Yeah, I've been telling people, not literally do I mean this, but this is Samsung's Moto Razr moment. I think that with the Z Flip 3, we're going to see them sell a ton of these, only because they've hit that $999 mental price point where it's easier to get over that hurdle of it being $1,000 phone, which most phones are $1,000 for a flagship device right now.
And subsidized anyway. You know what's going to happen within a month. Samsung's going to have a deal. All the carriers are going to have deals from pretty much the get-go. This is killer. And to me, the other killer is the IPX8, water resistance.
Yeah.
So that is a game changer, I think.
Yeah. 100%. It's, with the waterproofing of 1 meter up to 30 minutes, combined with the price and all of the colors, and it being a completely different form factor than what we've gotten used to, these black rectangles for the last 5 or 6 years, I think a lot of people who are on the fence about, do I really care about iPhone, or have older Android devices that are looking for something different, the Flip 3 is going to be wildly attractive to them, especially at $999. And that's 128 gigs of storage. You pay $50 more and you get 256 gigs of storage. Like that to me, that's the one I would buy.
I mean, absolutely. I already love the original Flip. I've got both the Flip and the Flip 5G. And I think that you can't go wrong here. Especially they made the front screen bigger, which was a big deal. The Razr was always so much better for that. The new Razr, the folding Razr, folding display Razr. I think that fixes a lot of the issues with the original where you really couldn't do anything with it closed other than read half of a notification.
Right. Yeah, so I haven't used any of the flips. Samsung, for whatever reason, doesn't send me any of their foldable devices. They'll send me all the other devices, but the foldables...
They don't do that for a lot of us. Like, I got my Z Flip original by buying it and returning it, and my Z Flip 5G is in AT&T reviewing it from those fine folks over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, the thing is, to me, stands out particularly here is I think it looks better. Like, I think the more slab sides, the more squarish edges versus the roundness of the original, the fact that it's a little more compact when closed, the water resistance, the bigger display in the front, which actually lets you interact with some things and do payments without opening the phone. And the old one, you had to open it up to do Google Pay. And the result that was that you never knew which way to hold it on the machine either. You know, like which side has the NFC, because it's not on both sides.
Yeah, right.
So I got so many weird stares when I used to like try to do contactless payment in the height of COVID last year with that phone. But like the reality is I'm super stoked about this. I think you're right. I think that between the fact that they've perfected this and the price point and the marketing that's going to go behind this, this phone, like if you're like on the fence between iPhone, Android, or you're a long-time iPhone user and you're trying to get out for whatever reason. Very rare. I know there's not too many people. They're locked in with iMessage and stuff. But you're looking at this and you're like, this is the reason to flip, right? Like, this is it. Pardon the pun. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah. I mean, it's super attractive and it's something different. And, they have, what are the flex mode where you can take pictures and group selfies. And like all of that. And to your point, the marketing approach to this with the cases that have clips on the back to hold, like the whole thing is super compelling to me. And honestly, I cannot wait to get my hands on one for once. Like I've always looked at their foldable announcements and been like, okay, cool. I'm glad they're trying something different. And this year is the first year for the flip and the fold where I've been like, I have to try these. I absolutely have to.
Yeah, for me, last year was that year. And that's why I went ahead and bought a flip when it launched and played with it for a bit. But then I realized, you know what? It's a little hard for me to justify keeping this considering how much I paid for it and how much, is still needs some tweaking, especially with that small display. But the other thing I want to point out is that spec-wise, really, this is just an upgrade over last year's. There's a Snapdragon 888. There is some cameras that are basically identical to last year's cameras. I mean, you can't go wrong with these. They don't look great on paper, but these are the tried and true 12 megapixel pair you see on phones like the S20 FE, which we all know is a fantastic camera phone. The previous Z Flip and the previous Z Fold3, these are solid, reliable, dependable cameras. Now there's no telephoto, and that's going to be a bit of an issue because with 12 megapixels zooming in is, you can't rely on that main sensor for 2x zoom to be as good as say on a 48 or 50 megapixel 2x zoom, but at the same time, for the kind of audience this is meant to, I think that works, right? I'm not going to complain. And it has everything you need. Wireless charging, you've got like, how much RAM is on this thing? Do you know off the top of your head?
8 gigs. 8 gigs.
Oh, there you go. So you're pretty future-proof there. Who needs more than that? Probably not too many people, maybe us, but I don't think the average person.
I'm good with 8.
Yeah, I'm happy with 8. 6 is a little rough. 4 is no go.
Yeah, let's not even talk about it.
It'll be interesting to see how that changes, if at all, with Android 12 coming out soon. But at the same time, a lot of Pixels from last year only have 6 gigs. So I think Google probably has this under control. Anyway, look, the Z Flip3, I cannot wait to get a review in it. I might be, Hot Hardware, I do for reviews for them. They think they're getting either a flip or fold. Depending on the timing, my availability and stuff, I might be reviewing one of those. So I'll keep you posted, folks, of course. And check the YouTube out to find out what's going on with that in terms of unboxings and whatever. But look, I don't know. I think that Samsung is just killing it here. Like, they're just killing it generally. It's funny too, though, because their business is not doing so hot. Like, they're not selling as many S21s as they wanted. Right. Yet at the same time, these are the best S20 or the S-class, S21 class devices we've ever had. And I think this is the same with these folding phones.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Z Fold3 and bringing the S Pen to it. And now they had to go and, re-engineer the S Pen.
How does that even work? after using a Z Fold 2 last year, I'm like, I wouldn't want to put anything pointy on the display. And I know they've probably made it more resilient, but I hear the tip retracts if you push too hard, right?
Yeah. That's the magic here for it. I think, obviously they have a more rugged display, I guess, is a way of putting it. But I think the magic is in the tip of the S Pen and the fact that it moves instead of being rigid as you ride across the screen, so it's not going to leave indentions.
Suspension design.
Yeah, I don't remember who posted it on Twitter, but someone tried using a standard S Pen on the display, and right away it said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Use only the approved S Pens for this display.
Oh, it detected it.
Yeah, it detected it and said, do not do that. Like, basically is what the message said, So it'll be interesting to see 6 months from now how these displays really hold up.
Does the converse work, though? Can you use the new S Pen on the old devices that support S Pens?
So the S Pen Pro Edition, which is the more expensive one, I believe can be used on older devices, but the S Pen Fold Edition can only be used on the Fold.
Ah, that makes sense, I guess.
You'll have to double check me, but I think that's what it was.
No, I think I remember this from the briefing. You're right. But look, I'm not an S Pen person.
Me either.
But I know there are a lot of people who are, and there's strong rumors we're not getting a Note this year probably because supply issues, quite frankly. But that means that maybe if you want, a phone with a stylus, an S Pen from Samsung, the S21 Ultra is an option, but it's a big phone to start with, but even bigger and bulkier with that case and that optional S Pen. But further, at that point, if you have something that big, it's less money, but you might as well go for the Z Fold 3, right? Because I think that you're getting more real estate. You're then having a case with a silo or whatever they're using. I think they have a loop or something, right?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, I think that works better then because it's like a folio at that point.
Right.
And you're going to be better. So I think it kind of makes sense that the Note would go away to give way to the Fold as a S Pen compatible device. Because the Note is all about note-taking, obviously, and people use it for that, a lot of people. I've seen them. I'm amazed that they do it, though. Like, I can't fathom how they do it, but they do it. And now they have, 1.5 times the screen real estate or something? Yeah. 2 times the screen real estate? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, a stylus makes more sense on a display this big. What is it, a 7.6-inch display when you open it up? It just makes more sense to have something to write on the display with, as opposed to even on the biggest Note device. That single width screen just didn't work for me.
Look, it's interesting that you bring up the displays because one of the things that they've done on both the Z Flip3 and the Z Fold3 this year is go 120 hertz across the board, right? Last year, the Z Flip did not have a high refresh rate display. Now it does. And the Z Fold, last year, the outside display was 60 hertz and the inside was 120. So that, I mean, to me, it's crazy that we still have phones out there that are shipping. And it's okay for the affordable phones, but most, even Chinese phones at less than $500 now, 300, 500, 400, have a 90 or 120 hertz display. So it's crazy to me that there are phones out there that are still shipping with 60 hertz, and especially at this kind of flagship price. So it makes sense that Samsung would do this, but at the same time, honestly, this Flip, it's welcome, but on the Fold, the front display could have stayed 60. I don't think it would have mattered that much,
Right,
fact that they went through that effort blows my freaking mind.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I see, to your point, there's really no need, and it would have been a way for them to lower the cost, right? And get down below that $1,800 threshold, which is where, heading into the event, the Z Fold 2 was priced at. And now we have the Z Fold 3 that starts at $1,800. So by doing a 60 hertz display, they could have lowered that price a little bit. But again, this is Samsung. In 2 months, there's going to be a good deal on the Z Fold 3. They're already
100%.
giving up to $1,000 or $800 for trade-ins. They'll let you trade in 4 devices this year.
Wow.
You could trade in...
simultaneously?
Yeah, you can. They will allow you to trade in up to 4 devices towards a Flip or a Fold 3. And they could be smartwatches, phones, or tablets. And I haven't gone through the process to see what their list of qualifying devices are.
Oh, this is totally a Jason Cipriani kind of article.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, 4 devices, that's a lot, but and you and I have that many laying around here, I guarantee it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I don't know many people that do outside of that. You could get, a flip for a couple $100 if you do it right.
I think this is good though, because it recycles. A lot of people,
100%.
they're not very good at recycling. And you still, even though you're right, like the Flip in particular is very much going to be a mainstream, fashion oriented, lifestyle oriented product. I think the Fold is still very much like I'm a pro, I want the S Pen, I'm a hardcore productivity nut. And those folks, are also the early adopter tech savvy nuts, and they have every freaking Galaxy Note ever made. And except for maybe the 7 that they had to return, but they have them. And if you can trade 2 of those in, right? Like, I think it's not impossible, and I can kind of see where Samsung's going with this.
Yeah, it is a good way to recycle and get that e-waste off of people's shelves and, whatever. But I wonder if you did try to trade in a Note 7, what they would say. That would be an interesting process.
They would freak out. Because you're not supposed to have had a Note 7 anymore.
Right,
all these years. It's like probably like unstable radioactive, kind of material that needs to be handled.
Right.
Like they need to clear the block in a 1 mile area if you bring one of those to a store. So be careful.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, the Z Fold3, let's quickly go some specs because there's some interesting stuff about the cameras I want to talk about. But the Snapdragon 888, of course, we got, is it 8 or 12 gigs of RAM on this one?
They bumped it up to 12 on both models.
Wow. Nice. Yeah. And then we have, what's the storage options?
You have 256 for $17.99 or 512 for $18.99. So $100 up.
That's not too bad, actually. 512, wow. So, there you go. And then it's thinner when it's closed again. It's also more slab design like the other one. And it is water resistant as well. How the hell did they make folding phones that are water resistant?
Yeah, so they showed a video during the keynote of how they did it. And instead of trying to waterproof the outside, they're basically admitting defeat and saying water can get inside. And they waterproofed the inside of the device. So there's like tape and there's, material in various places, strategic places that will keep water from getting to the main components.
So it's kind of like in a roundabout way what Moto's doing where they're nano coating, right? Like, they're water repellent nano coating on all the parts inside, which obviously is only a, drop in the toilet kind of thing. But it's still, you want that. It's better than losing your phone from something as, simple as spilling a glass of water on it.
Exactly.
And it's not going to be a glass of water. It's going to be coffee. It's going to be orange juice. It's going to be beer. And then you're really in trouble because of all that sticky stuff. So, yeah, I think this is pretty impressive. Yeah.
So what did you want to talk about the cameras?
Well, okay. So I'm going to leave the best for last or the most bizarre for last. The triple 12 megapixel rear camera system is an evolution of what we had on the Z Fold 2 and we have on the Galaxy S20 Fan Edition. I think the S20 Fan Edition has an 8 megapixel telephoto. This is, I think, a 12. So the point is that look, again, as I said for the Flip, you can't go wrong with this camera system. It's a really solid baseline. Samsung's been developing it for years. I think it's going to kick ass, but don't expect, to have like that Galaxy S21 Ultra, flexibility and the crazy, pixel count that lets you do some cool stuff. I've been reviewing cars lately for Tech Radar, EVs and plug-in hybrids. My first review is going to be coming out very soon. And it's like I've been taking the car photos with the S21. I decided like I need that level of flexibility with the telephotos because, cars don't look good at wide angle. They kind of look weird. So you want to be stepping back and doing like a 2, 3, 4x telephoto shot. And I was like, what phone? I mean, I have a lot of phones. I have like the P40 Pro Plus. I have a Note 20 Ultra, which has a 5X, a great 5X telephone. I was like, which phone do I think is going to be? And it's the S21 because I need, a Google Drive to upload Google Photos and stuff. So there you go. And honestly, I'm starting to find the limitations of that camera system for the first time. But at the same time, it's totally killing it. Like, I feel like I can show up at an event with just that and maybe my laptop, and I'm good to go, which is for phone reviews, I've always done that. I've been using phones to take pictures of phones for a really long time, and I have a workflow for that. But for cars, it was a new thing. I was like, can I pull that off? Do I still need to bring my Sony Alpha? No, I don't.
Right.
And that's kind of impressive to me, at least for web consumption. If I was doing magazine work, it'd be different. But it's interesting that Samsung has, managed to kind of like keep that 12 megapixel trio of cameras so good, so relevant for so long. And I guess, look, Apple does the same thing with the iPhone, right? Like, I mean, they don't have any 50 or 48 or 108 or 64 megapixel sensors in there.
No, they don't. Yeah, and it's all in tuning, right? I mean, that's what it all comes down to. They know their hardware, and they're able to tune the cameras to get the performance they want out of it, and they do an amazing job. Like you, I've used my iPhone actually as my main camera to cover events for the last couple of years, and I have had zero issues doing that. Now, taking pictures of cars, I probably have a learning process to go through like yourself, but phone. And it doesn't matter, Samsung or Apple. Phones are good enough with their cameras to take pictures and actually make a living doing it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, the challenge is a neutral density filter or some sort of polarization filter is what I really need. So that's missing, but I'm almost tempted to buy like a polarization card, and just like tape it to the back of the phone just while I shoot, because that's the biggest one. An ND filter, I don't think I need it per se. It would,
Sure.
I can play with the exposure and stuff. The biggest challenge I'm finding with the S21 Ultra, as an aside here, is the white balance and issues shooting in bright blue skies. Like everything turns blue, especially with the reflections on the cars. And the white balance is trying hard to find the right thing, and it's just not doing it. So I think that's where a real camera, I don't think phones are not real cameras. They're very usable cameras. I don't like that word real, no. But like a dedicated camera is more, probably more flexible there. I think that if I shot in manual mode, I'm going to try that next. I might lose some of the HDR and stuff, but I don't know how it works. Depends on the phones. But the setting the white balance based on location and leaving it there, I think might be the solution for that problem. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to the cameras on the Z Fold3, because there is also another of the cameras is the 10 megapixel front camera on both the Flip and the Fold. In the front of the Fold, like the actual cover display. And those, again, are the tried and true 10 megapixel selfie cameras that we've seen on a zillion Samsung phones and Notes for years. But the one that's really interesting is the under display camera on the main display of the Z Fold3. Do you know the specs on that off the top of your head?
4 megapixels is all I can remember right now. So 4 megapixels. It's not going to be.
Is it been down to 4 or 16 been down to 4, something like that? Because I hear that one of the problems with the under display and the way they're compensating for it is obviously you lose some light, right?
Yeah.
So you can only go so far with the f-stop. So they're doing pixel binning just to increase pixel size on a lot of these. So I'm wondering if Samsung's quoting the actual 4 megapixel of an actual 4 megapixel sensor, or saying, oh, it's a 16, we're not going to tell anyone with pixel binning by default. I don't know.
Yeah, they haven't said that, and that's interesting insight. I have yet to use a phone with an under display camera.
I'm in the same boat, but it's interesting because so it started with ZTE was the first to do it last year with the Ultra. What was it? The ZTE Axon 20, I think Pro maybe. Anyway, and it sucked. Like I didn't even request your unit. I saw the my YouTube creator friends getting theirs and showing, and I'm like, no, this is not even worth it. So, but ZTE has been in touch with me about the second gen, which is the Axon 30 5G, and it's in the mail. So I will be getting that before I get the Fold probably to try. And I'm sure that if Samsung put this on their most expensive flagship phone, right? I mean, it is their flagship. The S21 Ultra is kind of the old school flagship. Right. I think that it's got to be at least passable. And I know that the new ZTE, the Axon 30 is much better. Like I saw the samples so far and I'm like, wow, okay, this is workable. So
yeah, this obviously isn't going to be a camera you're going to take a ton of selfies on. This is going to be your Microsoft Teams Zoom camera while you're multitasking. But this isn't what you're going to flip to or fold open to take a selfie real quick. You may take some occasionally, but even if it is, just the 4 megapixel, there's a lot better cameras on this phone and a lot easier ways to take better shots than flipping it open.
Yeah, flex mode. Like, I mean, this is the thing. I would never even use the selfie cameras on this phone, on these phones, period.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's no reason.
It'll be interesting because, Samsung said they hide it really well, but every video and picture during the keynote, you could see clearly where the camera was. And so I haven't really paid much attention to any hands-on or anything yet, but I don't know how apparent it is on the display itself yet.
ZTE says that they have fixed some of these issues. I mean, the original phone last year's, the 20, whatever, the Axon 20 Pro, whatever it was, had like a clearly obvious square where the under display was. And it was just like, it made you shake your head. Like, even the average consumer would be like, what the hell is this?
This is just a cutout.
But this new one, the 30 that's coming, the Axon 30 5G that I've got on the way, it's much more subtle. And I think the way they explained it to me, at least ZTE here explaining it to me, is that they're able to make the pixels, instead of lowering the pixel density in that area, having less pixels, they're making the pixels smaller now. So the density remains, which is the big change from the first gen or second gen or whatever it was before, because, first gen was probably just in the lab.
Yeah, right.
And so, and I mentioned this on the show last week, like Xiaomi, we're going to talk about them in a minute. They've got the Mi Mix 4 now, which also has an under display camera. And then there is Oppo announced their under display camera. I think 2022 flagships, most of them are going to have some kind of under display camera. This is a thing now.
Yeah, I agree. And in Samsung's traditional pattern has been use the Note line, which the Fold or the Z series is now replacing effectively, as a test bed for features that are going to come to the S series. So I would say it's a safe bet the S22 Ultra 5G, add whatever words you want behind that, will have an under-display camera or in-display camera, whatever you want to call it, or whatever the current marketing term is. But yeah, I agree with you. 2022 is going to be full of phones that apparently don't have a front display camera, but it's there,
I think this might be an okay compromise if the quality is acceptable on the pictures it takes, insofar that, especially when you're gaming and stuff, really having a hole there is, even if it's a slightly less bright or slightly, less detailed there, it is important that you see whatever it is, that little enemy unit that's coming from that left field is right below the center hole punch. Like that, I mean, for some people, I think I don't game on my phone much, but some people do, and I appreciate it.
Or even just the letterbox display, so you don't have to deal with that. That's a little bit of screen real estate you have to give up. And I'm talking about Apple and the cutout.
Oh, man. They're going to have some problems getting all that under a display, all of that sensing stuff.
Yeah, they are. Just the dot matrix is going to be...
Yeah. I will see what happens. I mean, I think they're going to have to head that way eventually. People are not going to want something that looks like a Pixel 4, Pixel 4 XL with a giant forehead, like kind of like iMac, but upside down. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man. But look, let's kind of go over this real quick, this Samsung announcement. What do you think? Is this... We also have to talk about the buds real quick, but I think like overall, this is some good stuff. Like I just feel like, I'm not a Samsung fan. Like people know this on the show. I'm not like, I feel like I don't want to buy a Samsung phone simply because I don't want to be like everyone else. And it's like iPhone or Samsung in the US. It's kind of ridiculous. I know there's a lot of folks here listening from India and the UK and Australia and Canada, but like here in the US, it's like you pull out a Samsung and people don't even notice. Like you pull out an Oppo Find X3 Pro and people are like, what is that? Right? Like,
where'd you get that phone?
Yeah. And so that's kind of my vibe. But at the same time, I cannot deny with the specials that the carriers have, with the deals that roll in very quickly with Samsung, and generally the fact that in this country, people buy their phones on subsidy of some kind or some sort of payment plan, that you just can't go wrong with these Samsung phones or iPhones. And this is just stepping things up in a whole new direction, right?
Yeah, I think it completely changed, or at least for me personally, but I think it's going to broader than that. It's changed how people view Samsung devices, because you're right. People pull out the latest S20 or S21 and it's just like, okay, whatever. But you pull out a phone and you flip it open and you start seeing more and more people do that, or you fold it open because, the Fold has been out for what? 3 years now. This
Yeah.
is the third generation, and I have yet to see a random stranger open a Fold anywhere in public, let alone a Z Flip. So with it becoming more commonplace after this, because they're going to sell a ton of the Z Flip3, they are. That's going to change the conversation surrounding Samsung and how people look at their devices. This is the most excited coming out of a Samsung event I've been for their phones in a very long time, because most of the time it's just iterative improvements on hardware that's already there. The Note line gave us a preview of what was coming to the next S series. The S series led into the Note line, and it just was a cycle of, we kind of already knew what was coming based on what was out. This kind of flips that on its head, and we don't really know a whole lot.
Pardon the pun.
yeah, pardon the pun. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm excited. I think it was a solid event for Samsung, even if it was a bit commercially. It wasn't.
You expect that, right?
Yeah. It just their last few events seemed a little bit more personable, and this one was like a 65-minute infomercial.
Well, consider it's not as bad as the Galaxy S3 launch in New York was years ago. Remember that?
I don't remember that one.
Oh my God, it was a disaster. Anyway. It had all the isms that you can possibly imagine rolled into a presentation. Everybody was cringing. Or like, it got lost in translation, guys. But so let's talk about the last thing. They announced the Buds 2?
Galaxy Buds 2, Galaxy. So these replace the Galaxy.
With ANC, right? Woo-hoo.
Yeah, with ANC and ambient, $150. I think it's 5.5 hours of battery life, 5 hours of battery life when ANC is on, up to 29 hours of battery life with the case, which is pretty standard now for most of these, especially any of Samsung's wireless earbuds. But they're smaller, and that's what is really, I don't think they pushed that enough during the keynote, is these buds are small, and they fit really well, and they sound good. The ANC isn't as good as they are on, say,
you have a pair?
AirPods Pro. I do, yeah. I have the lime green pair, or whatever color. Olive green.
Nice. Yeah.
And, I've enjoyed using them. The ANC, like I said, they said it blocks out 98%, but it's less than that, because I can hear it typing on my keyboard. I can still hear it. It comes through. So they're not as good as the AirPods Pro, but you're also saving yourself $100. Here's something we didn't talk about that we should probably mention, and it's that the Buds 2 and the Galaxy Watch 4 no longer are being supported officially on iPhone. So you can't use the watch with an iPhone. You can pair the Buds 2 to an iPhone, but they're not updating their wearable app to make it compatible so you can change settings and update firmware and all of that. So in a way, they're dropping support for anything outside of the Android ecosystem now, which at the end of the keynote, if you didn't watch it, you didn't see this because they didn't even do this during the briefing, they went on about how they are about open ecosystems and not locking anyone into anything, yet they pulled iPhone support from the accessories that traditionally have had iPhone support.
So what's the retail on these then?
They are $149.
So what about the same price as the upcoming OnePlus Buds Pro, which also have ANC? Does the case have wireless charging?
It does. They don't advertise it anywhere, but it does.
Yeah, so is OnePlus. So this is where I'm trying to give folks some perspective as to where they can place these in the market.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, you got ANC, you got $150 price point. They're small, they're light, they've got good battery life. How do they sound? They sound like typical Samsung buds because they're pretty good. All of them have been pretty decent to me.
Yeah, I don't have any complaints about sound at all. Like, I'm no audiophile, so I can't go into highs, mids, and lows. But look, they sound as good as the Galaxy Buds Pro and whatever else they had, the bean-looking ones. I forget what those were called off the top of my head. They're right in line with all of those.
Yeah, I think that the reality is basically right now we're kind of at the big brands are finally kind of joining the Alibaba, Amazon special no-name brand ANC earbud pricing, and they're slowly getting in that direction, for better or for worse, right? I mean, the reality is that within 2-3 years, you'll be able to buy from all the big brands, like you do right now in China from all the big Chinese brands, but very soon in the US, from all the big brands that sell phones here will be selling buds pretty much in every store for like $99 or less, and they will all have ANC and wireless charging and everything. This is starting now. The Nothing Ear 1, which I have a review of, and I can actually say sound pretty damn good for the money.
Do they?
$99, ANC, wireless charging, good battery life, sound decent, and here you go. And they look really cool. The design is very interesting.
Yeah, they do
but
look slick.
The other ones are the TCL Move Audio S600, which came out with the TCL 20 series here in the US recently, the phones. And those are $99 as well. And they're, like ANC, wireless charging, sound really decent, and good battery life and comfortable. Again, I think there's a pattern. And then, you go up $50 and you get the Galaxy Buds 2 and you get the OnePlus Buds Pro, which we're all waiting for reviewing it still, so we don't know. But the reality is it's happening, and Apple is going to have to adjust. I mean, in the same way as they made a $99 HomePod, they're going to have to make, I think very soon, at least a $150 pair of AirPods that have ANC, have wireless charging, and maybe they'll do $179. But you know what I'm saying? Like the same price 100%. As you can get most of the stuff right now for cheap, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're supposed to see AirPods 3 hopefully in September, so maybe that's when we'll see.
Yeah, how long has it been? Like the rumors are just like forever rumors at this point.
Yeah, it seems like a rolling rumor. Yeah, it's been going on forever.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's Samsung, folks. Here we are, 40 minutes in. That's exactly what I was expecting. Perfect. We've covered pretty much everything. And as we said earlier, like I think the takeaway here is we can't just make fun of this and just be, kind of like blasé about it. This is good stuff all around. Like I cannot say, like before I could say, well, they're running Tizen. I can't get, the Google Assistant on the watches, and I can't get my Google Maps, even though I love the battery life, the experience, right? But now you have that with the Google integration. On the phones, you got water resistant. The prices have gone down. Everything's up to date in specs. And as you said, the Z Flip, I think, is I would be really surprised if it doesn't do well. Yeah. The only thing I can think of is people are so, struggling financially that they're just not even going to bother. And it's going to take another cycle before they hand on, they sell or give away their old broken phones to get this one.
I agree.
But other than that, like it can't go wrong. And then of course, the Buds, well, another pair of Buds from Samsung, not too surprising. But the Fold is just, the Fold, I bought the Z Fold 2 last year. Again, I returned it because I couldn't justify keeping it, but it was such a great, it was insane. It's such a powerhouse. And it was so fast too, like feel fast. Like not, you can look at the specs and run the benchmarks, but like, I just was like, I can be so productive on this thing. Like really, really. And so if the Z Fold 3 is better, which we hope it is, in terms of specs translating into performance, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on board with that fully. I cannot wait. I have ordered a Z Fold 3 that I plan on returning since Samsung won't send me one. But like, this is the first time I've done that at all. And so, it's supposed to arrive on August 27th when all of these devices are officially available. And I cannot wait to get one in my hands.
Yep. All right. So we got a few more topics. It's actually a pretty quiet week because Samsung just, like last week with the, Pixel news, where Google kind of stole the show for the rest of the week. This week, obviously, we knew there was going to be a vacuum created by the Samsung stuff. Sure. But there's a bunch of Chinese phone news that I think are pretty interesting, actually. So I want to go over there real quick. I don't know how much you follow these phones because I know that a lot of the US, journalists have their hands full with just what we get here. Yeah. I tend to have an audience that's kind of international. So because of that, I always keep an eye on the Chinese stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't really follow, Oppo, Xiaomi, I follow them a little bit just so I could, because they always seem to do stuff earlier than it makes it to Samsung and Apple and everyone else, right? It kind of trickles down from there. They usually push limits, but I don't follow them extremely closely. I've never received a review device or even requested one from either company.
Yeah. So the Mi Mix 4 is out in China, and it was announced. I don't know if it's actually, you probably pre-order it or something. And it is kind of hard to place it because it was traditionally the Mi Mix series was always the flagship, right? And then it stopped for a while. They just haven't made one since the Mi Mix 3 like 2 or 3 years ago. And so we've had the Xiaomi 11 and 11 Ultra that are really like think Galaxy S21, S21 Ultra in terms of spec and performance, right? Those exist. I've got both of them, and they are pretty much, what you expect. Like everything in the kitchen sink, phenomenal camera systems, just, they're killing it. Xiaomi is killing it right now. They were number one phone maker globally in June. It's insane. And so, okay, but then the Mix just came out of the woodwork again, the Mix 4, and it's kind of hard to place it because like compare that spec-wise to the 11 Ultra, and the 11 Ultra is still like the mother of all phones, like the S21 Ultra. But this is kind of like pushing the envelope. It's kind of in a way like the Flip, you know, it's like it might not be quite spec-wise as insane, but it's close, A, and B, it's super like premium, you know, and I think that's kind of the takeaway I get from this. So you get an under-display camera here, and it's a 20 megapixel. So they are definitely doing the quad pixel binning down to 5 megapixel to improve the low light performance, or the fact that there is basically some dimming of light coming in from the display. And 6.67 inch 1080p panel, of course, it's probably 120 hertz like all panels these days. And you know, camera systems are almost a match, other than that crazy under display front camera, is a match for the Mi 11, right? So we're looking at like that 108 megapixel main sensor from the Mi 11. And I think there's like there's a periscope telephoto on this, which is also present on the Mi 11 Ultra. So it's like a blend of the camera systems from the 11, the 11 Ultra. And again, the goal here is to make a super premium phone ceramic, right? Like that, the Mi Mix prior to that were also ceramic. And it's ceramic all the way around. Like it's, I mean, there's a bit of a frame, but it's really quite something, especially the white one. And, you know, everything like Snapdragon, this is an 888 Plus. So this is like it's like officially, because the next day we got the next phone we're going to talk about, the Honor Magic 3. And the Honor Magic 3 was announced to have an 888 Plus officially before the Mi Mix 4. But the Mi Mix 4 came out before. So technically one of these two phones is the first 888 Plus phone. And also this has Xiaomi's own kind of implementation of ultra wideband, which we've seen on the iPhone and on Samsung phones, and right now isn't really used for much other than on the iPhone. It's used extensively for the Find My features, right?
Yep.
So interesting that we're starting to see that. I hope they can standardize across multiple manufacturers. I assume that the radios use the same bands because the bands are only available through the FCC and other organizations and agencies in various countries, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, we've got, 8 megapixel 5x telephoto, periscope, 108 megapixel main, 13 megapixel ultra wide, like nothing too crazy. 4,500 milliamp hour battery, but here's the killer. 120 watt wired charging.
Yeah.
Like it's not the first Xiaomi phone with it, but in the past they haven't put it in their flagships. So this is kind of incredible. 50 watt wireless charging, again, we've seen this on OnePlus and stuff, and Xiaomi's done it before, but 120 watt charging.
They claim 0 to 100% in 21 minutes. I need that.
0 to burn your desk in 21 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes in the last minute.
I don't know. I mean, I like the idea that you plug it in for 5 minutes and you in the shower and you come out and you get 50% of your battery back. But I do worry a little bit about the longevity when you do this too often, right?
Yeah, that's the main concern with any of this faster charging tech, right? Is yes, it's nice, and this goes to what you were talking about earlier, electric cars as well. It's a battery issue at the core. Is eventually that battery is going to degrade to the point where it's not worth charging at all anymore. So it's impressive.
But it's interesting. I'm on my second Model 3. I had one for 3 years from launch on to this summer, and then I got a new one this summer, just mostly because I wanted some of the software features have, obviously every month kept track, but they've done a few tweaks under the hood because Tesla doesn't update their cars yearly like normal makers. They do whatever updates they feel like, whenever they do feel like. Which is probably a nightmare for people trying to repair these cars because VIN number, this only applies to this week of manufacture. But the reality is I can tell you the battery degradation was very minor. And I did a lot. My first Tesla, I was living in Portland, Oregon and San Francisco and commuting back and forth a lot. So I was using supercharging a lot.
Sure.
And I wasn't always charging to 100, but I was often having to charge pretty high. And I saw some degradation, but over 33,000 miles of driving, I saw maybe 5 to 7% degradation. which considering I don't have charging at home or anything, so I was always charging at superchargers usually. It's a pretty impressive.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty impressive how battery management can work. And I think for these phones, it's probably the same. Like I know that on the OnePlus phone, you have intelligent charging where it kind of detects with, your usage habits, and it will slow down the charging if it knows that you're going to charge all night based on previous patterns. You can turn that off and stuff. And I've seen this on Chinese phones as well, Xiaomi, Oppo, where they have these features where it lets you kind of tweak that manually and or have these automated things where they're like, hey, like you haven't picked up the phone for the last 10 minutes. I'm going to slow down the charging now, right? Because I want to keep the battery happy. And then it's interesting. Like, I think that with all the sensors phones have, they can kind of get a snapshot of their environments and decide, like, is this based on time of day and the fact that I'm hearing no noise, no motion, no light?
Yeah.
Probably slow down charging because it's probably...
And temperature of the room, right?
Yeah, it's probably they're sleeping right now. So, AI, again, comes in here with machine learning, looking at these patterns. So we're going to see some of that stuff happening. So anyway, I think it's this is a very interesting phone. Will it come to the West? There might be a global version. We don't know. But the pricing in China is always, again, a lot of these companies subsidize their pricing through services, as like Apple does. And Apple doesn't use subsidy. So Apple has all these services, but doesn't subsidize devices with them. But like Amazon is what I should say, right? $770 US for the 8 gigs version, 128 gig. And the $970 for the 12 gig, 512 gig, which is very aggressive. So you can easily 1.5 times that price or 1.3 times that price for global versions. So, again, Xiaomi lately has priced their flagships like the Mi 11, Mi 11 Ultra, and this Mix 4, at the higher tiers of pricing, like to compete with Samsung in the West. And I think that's because they can. That's because they finally are, on equal footing to what Apple and Samsung and the best are making,
and it's working for them.
And I think that they sell so many phones with their Poco line, their Redmi line, and their cheaper Xiaomi line that are like every price point from like $100, every $50, right? Pretty much that you have no reason to necessarily spend that kind of money and still get a really great Xiaomi phone. Like the Mi 11 Lite 5G is a really great example of that. It's 98% of the Mi 11 for like 75% of the price,
That's awesome.
So yeah. So like, look, I'm not crazy excited about this, but having had a Mi Mix 3 to review before a couple of years back, and that ceramic body and like the all screen, nothing interrupting the screen kind of setup, it's just nice. And this is, instead of like a motorized camera or something like that, they're using an under-display camera, which the Mi Mix 4 was the first bezel-less phone. I mean, I should say the Mi Mix, the original. And so this is continuing that tradition. And if you look at the renders and the photos here in this article from Engadget, it's like there's almost no bezel on this phone. It's just all screen.
Yeah, the one thing that stood out to me was the ceramic housing, and I desperately want to try a phone with ceramic housing. That has to be just a pleasure to use.
Oh, it feels, I mean, first get a lighter color because they're fingerprint magnet. It's insane. Like you cannot keep them clean.
Yeah.
But they're very durable and they feel like China, like a plate.
Yeah.
But like then if you drop it, nothing happens. Like it's uncanny. It's like they are so strong yet so it's not the same cold material as metal or glass, but it's closer to glass, but it still has its own kind of, it's hard to explain.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. I think anyone who is a watch fan and has had a ceramic watch or partially ceramic watch can relate. It's something about, it's like titanium.
Sure.
It's like, it's a different material than aluminum and you immediately know it's titanium, right?
Yeah, there's an obvious difference.
Yep. So this is the Mi Mix 4, folks, from Xiaomi. And Xiaomi, of course, because they're Xiaomi, and I love China. I freaking love Chinese companies. They're just freaking nuts. Like, oh, let's make a robot dog to compete with,
Boston
or not
Dynamics.
compete, or to kind of match Spot or whatever it's called, the
Right.
Boston Dynamics robot dog. Like, I'm partially like totally excited about this and partially completely scared to death about it.
So I was reading the story that you sent over last night, and the thing that stood out to me was it's about $1,600 US if you could do the conversion. But it's open source, which allows any developer to add whatever they want through the accessories like LiDAR and all this other stuff through the open ports on the dock. So all I could envision was someone just being like, yeah, I got $2,000 to waste buying this dog and just developing the crap out of it and adding a whole bunch of unnecessary stuff to this robot dog. It sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
Well, I think if you're, a company that is looking at, you don't want to develop your own robot, but you're trying to develop a solution for a client, this is a good starting point. And I think that, China has so much manufacturing and robotics industry already that I think that it just makes sense for them to have like this kind of starting platform instead of having to reinvent the wheel, right? Like there's a market for that. I think not just in China, but particularly in China where manufacturing is so strong, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my gut feeling about it.
But they only made 1,000 of them. They're calling it, the Cyber Dog. So there's only 1,000 units. It's not like we're going to see these all over the place. But it's going to be interesting to see what people do, especially because they are open source to some extent with the dogs themselves and, what sensors they add to it. LiDAR would be fascinating to see what you could do with that and program the dog to move around rooms.
Yeah. I know there's a whole bunch of Intel sensing technology in there, which was really interesting to me that they went to Intel for some of the technology in this product. So, yeah, I was not expecting that. It's also interesting to see that we've kind of like landed, how technology, when it's developed by multiple companies, lands usually in the same kind of ballpark.
Right.
And we're seeing the same kind of design in terms of the legs and stuff, right? So I think that's pretty interesting to me that they have this thing that looks like Spot from Boston Dynamics or whatever.
It looks a lot like it. It's very, very uncanny. And
3.2 meter per second is almost the same speed as Spot. But anyway, it's got NVIDIA power. It's got Intel stuff in it. And it's pretty cool. I just had to mention it because I think it's just, to me, it's like, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. It's like Xiaomi, has the mic. It's like they're like so big that they can do this, but at the same time, like I was not expecting it from them. Yet, oh, look at that! Of course they made a robot dog, and of course it has all this crazy tech, and of course they're selling it because why not? Yeah. Basically, if you can.
That's just you're sitting around bored one day and want to make 1,000 cyber dogs. I mean,
if you're an engineer, this is the kind of stuff you live for, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's see what we got here. Honor Magic 3. Okay, let's talk about this a bit because there's a bunch of ancillary stories around this that I think are interesting. There is rumors that some Republican lawmakers, believe it or not, are trying to get Honor on the ban list.
Even after the sale. Really?
Because they still think that they have ties to the Chinese government. But of course, I expect nothing else from, Republican lawmakers. But I want to preface this in saying that don't get too excited about these phones becoming available soon as global phones with GMS, because we know Honor has said that their phones are going to have GMS and that they're going to be available globally. Not in the US specifically, so don't expect 5G support in the US, but at least you'll be able to import them and they will run on LTE and you'll get some cool phones in your hands. But it might not last. And so just be aware of that. I just want to preface this because it pisses me off.
Yeah.
Like it's annoying to me that I'm actually surprised that our new government is not lifting this Huawei ban. Like, it's just like not. I understand on the network infrastructure side that there are concerns, but I think that the actual like phones and laptops and things like laptops are not affected. They still get Intel chips and Microsoft Windows on them. Why is it that phones are such a big deal? Like, it's crazy to me when Huawei was making some of the best phones on the planet and still does, but like they're useless without GMS.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gone on my show, Jason Squared, the podcast I co-host at ZDNet, and we've talked about this topic quite a bit. And it always boils down to show us the evidence, right? Like if there is all of this evidence, and I realize there's probably a lot of it that's classified, but at least give us something. Because right now it just looks like you're picking on a company, and it still looks like that. I fully expected the new administration to revisit this within the first year, and we're still within that, but it hasn't even been a topic.
I'm disappointed about that. I mean, I'm so glad we have a new regime, but like this is a sticking point for me. And again, maybe there's good reasons, but I don't see them. I don't know them, and maybe I'll never know. We'll never know. Maybe it's beyond our pay grade, as they say. But it stifles innovation to me.
It does.
It just kind of reinforces that duopoly we have in the US, at least, of Samsung and Apple, Samsung and Apple.
Yep.
Now, I'm not expecting if they lift the ban for Huawei to come in here and sweep things, but I think the reason we're not seeing Xiaomi after all these years come into this country, yet, even though they've sold TVs here and they sell vacuum cleaners and they sell air purifiers and they sell all kinds of other appliances here.
Android TV streaming boxes.
Yeah, it's because they're afraid. I don't think they're comfortable. They're worried that if they start selling their phones, they're going to become a target. And clearly, like, Honor's already starting to be a target. So
yeah.
Anyway, let's go back to tech. Honor Magic 3. The Magic has always been the kind of like the future-looking flagship, almost concept phones from Honor, but they've always sold them, and usually only in China.
Yeah,
but it's going to eventually launch globally, according to Honor. And there's 3 models, and they're pretty bonkers. Have you looked at the specs?
I have, and I've looked at the prices too, which are even more bonkers. They are insane. The Magic 3 Pro Plus, which is fully loaded, 12 gigs of RAM, 512 storage, translation or, convert it, it's a little over $1,700 for a phone.
So it's basically, they're pulling what Huawei did with their flagship, like the P40 Pro Plus last year, which is like a $1,500 flagship.
Right, yeah. And I mean, you and I both know that's not going to go well here in this market. But these are...
you have to understand that the euro pricing includes taxes and a bunch of other stuff, and it always, ends up being cheaper from importers here anyway, like GearBest and whatever. But I think you're right. For normally, as we saw with the Mi Mix 4 there, these are the prices we're expecting, like, wow, but this is affordable for what you're getting. But Honor is just like, nope, we're going to show you that we're serious in playing with the big boys or whatever here, and the Apples and the Samsungs of the world.
Yeah,
Crazy.
And the cameras are just fully loaded. I mean, they have everything they could possibly throw in a phone, going into like the Pro has a 64 megapixel telephoto, half-inch sensor. Hey, that sounds pretty good with optical image stabilization.
Yeah.
Pro Plus has a main 50 megapixel sensor. These phones are fully loaded, and I would love to play around with them. I'm kind of bummed that odds of that happening are very low.
Well, don't be too surprised. I would reach out to your Honor person. I've heard that we're going to possibly be able to get review units of these. Nice. So I'm definitely going to pursue it because, again, they're a different company now. They're no longer attached to Huawei. They are making phones with Qualcomm chips, and they're making GMS phones. So, so the Pro and Pro Plus, Snapdragon 888 Plus, we knew that. The Magic 3 has 888, and they all have this really crazy resolution. I mean, it's interesting how so much of this phone specs matches previous Huawei phones, obviously, because they were engineered, I think, still when they started like planning them when Huawei was still owning Honor. Like that display, the 1344p, that 120 hertz, is pretty much what we are going to see on the P50 series as well from Huawei, and is an evolution of the 90 hertz display we found on the P40 series last year. So not surprised. It's bigger though. 6.76 is a bigger size. The P40 series is actually a relatively compact phone for a flagship. But yeah, those rear cameras are crazy. Like the 3 has like a 50 megapixel, as you said, and the 13 megapixel. But then also interestingly, the monochrome camera, which we saw back on the P50. So again, I think these were designed like traditionally, the Honor brand was always detuned and more aggressively priced versions of the Huawei brand. Right. And this is clear that the development started in parallel. And the fact that the P50 is also available with Snapdragon 888, but with 5G disabled, is also an indicator that they just ran out of Kirin chips. And they were already planning to do Qualcomm no matter what. So the Pro adds a 64 megapixel telephoto, 3.5 optical, nice. And then the Plus is kind of crazy. Like it's like a bigger sensor, a bigger 50 megapixel sensor. And it'll be interesting to see if these are RYYB sensors, like remember the Huawei phones of past, or which bespoke Sony sensor they got made for them this time, because that's basically what Huawei and Honor were doing before. Honor was always reaping the benefits of these, trickle down the benefits from these Huawei sensors onto their phones. And I think in this case, because the fork happened like in the middle of this transition, I think we're going to see a lot of commonality in the P50 series and this phone. I'm excited. This is basically a P50, pretty much if you look at the specs. More expensive though, which is weird, but with GMS. So like, bring it on. I want my review in it. I'm gonna have a tantrum. God damn it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hope that they do bring review units here. I'll definitely reach out to my contact.
Yeah, I did reach out to them and they said that, stay tuned, it's coming. We're not sure when, what, and because it's not quite launched globally yet. I think we're just gonna have to wait for the global launch before they can officially like grant us access to these devices. So
that makes sense.
That makes sense. And then the IMAX branding is interesting to me. It's like, which imaging powerhouse can we partner with on this?
Yeah.
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 So anyway, that's the Magic 3, folks. Honor's back, and I hope they stay back. I hope they continue being with us for a while, because I like these phones. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not a big fan of the waterfall display on the sides of these, but the rest of it, pretty dope if you ask me, right?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Huawei's always put out good phones. Honor has followed it up, like you said, with the trickle-down features, and I've enjoyed using both brands for quite a number of years.
Cool. Well, listen, we're going to wrap up with one last topic, and that's the MediaTek Dimensity 920 and A10 announcements. I had James Chen of MediaTek on the podcast last week, walking us through the evolution of Wi-Fi and where it's headed in the future. And it was very interesting. And honestly, I've been a big fan of the MediaTek Dimensity chips. The 700, which is their entry-level 5G chip, in my opinion, if you're going to buy an affordable 5G phone today, and you can either get a Snapdragon 480 5G or you can get a 700 5G. The 700 is a better chip. And, it's cheaper too, but that doesn't matter. Like, you forget the price for a second. You're wanting an affordable, budgety kind of phones. That is a better chip. And so, of course, there's the 800 series, 900 series, 1000 series, 1100, 1200. The 1200 is a Nord 2. By the way, I've got a Nord 2 review unit. Nice. I was able to score one.
Congrats.
It was a lot of jumping hoops to get that one, because in the past, I reviewed the Nord for Hot Hardware last year. They sent me one automatically, but this year, I think OnePlus, because they're diversifying in their portfolio, is really focusing on sending review units only to the journalists in those markets.
Sure.
And so none of the US media got Nord 2s, but I've been pushing so hard and I finally have one. So stay tuned for a video, folks. And more importantly, my thoughts on the show next time, again, when I get a chance. So these are new chips, 920, 810, evolutions of the existing series. And I just wanted to mention them because it just means more possibilities for phone makers to make affordable, in this case it's more mid-range, this series, but mid-range 5G phones. And we're starting to see more Dimensity phones in the US. We had the Velvet last year from T-Mobile, which was different chip, but same phone as the Velvet with Qualcomm. And, RIP LG phones, right? And we have currently the cheapest 5G phone in the US. I just got a review unit as well, is the T-Mobile Revel V Plus 5G, and that's a Dimensity 700 5G, and it looks surprisingly and suspiciously similar in specs, other than the chip and the 5G, to the TCL 20 SE.
Oh, really?
Yet I pinged Brad at TCL, and he said, no, we did not make this phone OEM for T-Mo. This company called WingTech did it.
Interesting.
Yet, if you look at the displays are identical, the cameras are identical, like spec identical, the battery identical, the shape and size of the chassis are very similar. The battery, the camera bump, the ports. The only thing that's slightly different is the fingerprint sensor got relocated to the edge of the phone on the T-Mobile version, and it's on the back of the phone on the TCL. But I'm like, Brad, you're just messing with me, dude. Like, there's no way this is not a TCL phone. And I'm like,
right.
Nope, it's not. Anyway, that phone, I'm gonna play with it and let you know what I think, because I'm very intrigued, but how bad or how good can a $200 5G phone be?
Yeah, I know
T-Mobile right now, I keep joking about this, but you can walk into any T-Mobile store and probably walk out for free with a 5G phone.
Oh, you absolutely could.
Like, they are so intent on giving you a 5G phone right now.
Yeah.
But I think this is good. This is good news. Like, when I reviewed the OnePlus Nord N200 for Hot Hardware, I finally got to see some mid-band, and I got 300 down and 50 up.
Wow.
Like, in the middle of the boonies. I was like, at $240, whatever that phone costs, I'm like,
all right,
I can see this being great, especially if you're like in the boonies and you want a hotspot. Like, this is great,
Yeah,
So,
T-Mobile doesn't work where I live, like, at all. I have to drive a few miles down the road to get T-Mobile service, reliable T-Mobile service. It's so any of that stuff is off limits for me. So I didn't request that a review unit of the Revel, but Where it works great, but just
You're in Colorado somewhere, right? So
I am. I'm in about 2 hours south of Denver.
Oh, okay. So they probably just don't reach out to that. But I bet you're okay in Denver or Boulder or something.
Oh
right?
yeah, in larger cities, drive 2 miles down the road, I'm fine. But where I'm at, it's a dead spot.
It's a dead spot.
And the map shows it's full 5G signal.
They probably lie. Did you see that new FCC map?
Yeah, I
that
did.
actually uses modeling of the terrain and the propagation of the signal based on the frequency and the physical location of the towers. Since they have all that data, the FCC, it in some areas confirms that their maps, like the carrier maps, are correct, but in some areas you're like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
You're pushing it, and maybe you're in one of those places. Anyway, I'll leave a link in the show notes for this GSM Arena post that summarizes what these MediaTek chips bring to the market. I'm not going to get into it here, but just expect more MediaTek phones, and I welcome them. So, and don't get me wrong, I think that Qualcomm is obviously still doing great stuff, but I feel like MediaTek's just really been pushing it. Like they're just aggressive right now.
They
and
really
it's just
are.
like you gotta love that aggressive stance. It's great stuff. Anyway, Jason, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, like your social media handles and where you write and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I freelance for a ton of different places. ZDNet is one of them. So zdnet.com, you can find me on there. Easiest way to keep up with what I'm doing or ask me questions, get in touch is on Twitter. I'm Mr. Cippy, MrCippy, at Mr. Cippy on Twitter. And I'm on there all the time. Even if I'm not tweeting, I'm still around. So feel free to reach me there. Other places you could check my work, CNET, write how-to articles for them. Those of you who are watching the video recording of this, see all the power stations and lamps behind me. I review battery packs and wireless chargers and stuff for PC World, and there's a lighting battery endurance test for power stations going on behind me. So, IGN, review gaming laptops, and CNN_ do a whole bunch of stuff there.
Cool. Yeah, you folks should follow Jason. Good stuff. And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like Tank Girl, the comic book character, but drop the vowels. That's my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle. If you want to discuss this podcast with Jason and I, please hit us up on Twitter. And if you want to see pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures taken with phones, check out my Instagram. I got a whole bunch of stuff there. The podcast, as you know, lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, pretty much everywhere good podcasts can be found. So please subscribe and tell your friends. There's an RSS feed there also. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. It really helps. There's a couple of YouTube channels to go along with the podcast as well. youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. The first is a visual complement to the show. Since this is primarily an audio podcast, except for those of you on Patreon who are watching us on video right now, and I'll get to that in a second. Since it's mostly an audio podcast, if you want to see the devices I just talked about, that Revel V Plus 5G and the Nord 2 when I unbox it, there'll be videos on my YouTube channel for that. And it's unboxing, hands-on reviews, that kind of stuff. Mobile Tech More is a new channel. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. It's probably not that new now, like about a year old. But my producer and I are trying to figure out how we're going to set this up. And I think it's going to be mostly like the more part of mobile tech. So essentially, all the accessories and the lifestyle stuff and the travel tech and the car tech and home automation, that kind of stuff. Whatever we get our hands on, time permitting. Right now, it's been really hard to get the channel off the ground because we just have so much going on with just the main stuff. But stay tuned, and we'd appreciate you subscribing anyway. So yeah, like, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff on the YouTube channel. That really helps on both channels. And finally, the Patreon. I just said, we've got a whole bunch of great tiers on patreon.com. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. And you can get access to the Discord server. Another tier lets you see this video unedited right after I record it, which is nice because you get the podcast a little earlier and on video, and you don't have to get any edits. So you get all the mess ups that I do pretty regularly. So yeah, please join the Patreon if you can help and support us. And I want to thank Morgan Johnston today for joining this week. Thanks, Morgan. And again, folks, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. Check it out. And finally, I can't do this without thanking our sponsor, Audible. Audible has been with us since the early days of the show, and they're pretty awesome. They've been sponsoring us forever, and they help us, and you can help them help us by checking out this link, audibletrial.com/mobiletech. It's a way to get 30-day free trial with Audible if you're not already a member, and you get to keep a free book if you don't decide to stay. Hopefully, you will decide to stay because you know what? If you love books as much as I do, Audible's a no-brainer. It's basically the best audiobook platform on the planet. They don't do just audiobooks. They do all kinds of audio content, podcasts, a bunch of other stuff. And their selection is incredible. They have a lot of books read by the authors. And, if you're like me, you like books, but maybe you're a delivery driver or you like to go on road trips and I'm the main driver in my household. So, I have to be behind the wheel. I can't really read. And also I get seasick if I do. So anyway, Audible has just been fantastic to have in the household, my family and I. So check it out, audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Support us by supporting them. I want to thank Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And Jason, thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a real pleasure.
All right, my friend, I'll have you on again soon. And folks, we'll have another podcast next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.